Hi everyone, it's Nicole. Welcome back to my channel and another paper crafting video tutorial. Today I'm going to share 3 ideas for creating mushroom themed cards on Kraft Cardstock. One of the cards, the second card I'll show you here, was inspired by the card I created in my Patreon, and I decided to go a different colorway for this video to recreate it and then create a couple of more cards as well. All of the stamps that I am using today and some of the dies are from Papertrey Ink. I also will be incorporating a few other products from my stash that are oldies but goodies, some favorites that I have used over and over. I was showing there on the screen the card from Patreon, which obviously was a colorway completely on white cardstock. So it gives you a little bit different look. On social media, I'll make sure and post those side by side so you can really see the difference. I am a huge fan of Kraft Cardstock. I love how it looks, and so I decided why not try stamping everything on Kraft and recreating the card basically completely. It is exactly the same other than the fact that I used a Kraft card base rather than white. And I didn't use any of the salvage patina ink for the background as I did for the white version. We're going to keep it more muted with browns, obviously on that Kraft background. Now I will tell you, these first 2 mushrooms I stamped, I actually ended up restamping. I don't love these. This is the number 2 pencil ink from Lawn Fawn. Most of the ink, if not all, the ink I'm using to stamp my mushrooms and leaves and other images is from Lawn Fawn. For whatever reason, I really love stamp layering with Lawn Fawn, Hero Arts, Pink Fresh Studio. I like doing those kind of stamp layering techniques with those inks, and so I just pulled some of my favorite Lawn Fawn inks for this. So it's just like that card I kind of showed at the beginning, the white version. And some of the dies, this leaf die in particular, oh, I bumped things. Sorry about the shaking. It is a solid die, meaning it's not an outline. So I die cut it first. And sometimes with Papertrey ink, I will die cut the shapes first anyway. I find I have a little bit easier time lining those up. The other thing that I find works really well with any kind of stamp layering images, especially Papertrey ink, because they do tend to have a lot of little images, and so it makes it a lot easier to kind of have them right out in front of you and see what you have so that you don't miss any little part or piece. Sometimes I will stamp the images and then die cut for anything that has an outline die. Sometimes I'll die cut them first. It really just depends. There are quite a few parts and pieces for these mushrooms if you choose to use them that way. For example, the mushrooms do have separate tops. I didn't use them for the most part. I think I only used them maybe on 1 or 2 mushrooms total for all 3 of, or all the 2 cards where I used this particular stamp set. So you're gonna see me go ahead and just start stamping all of these mushrooms. This is such a cool set. I know mushrooms are kind of quote unquote popular right now, and you see them all over the place. This set is called Wild About Mushrooms, and it instantly drew my eye. The other set we're going to use today is a die set, and it's called Into the Blooms. And I think they work interchangeably together. I am doing 2 cards with the mushroom stamp layering set, and then we will do 1 card with just the dies, the standalone dies. Now, anything I'm stamping is going to end up being a little bit lighter than what you see originally. So I did stamp, I need to zoom out. There we go. Ha, so much better. I stamped everything, and then I didn't love some of the colors I chose, so I went ahead and chose something else, and that is totally okay. I always kind of like to be transparent in what I'm thinking, what I'm doing, how I go about creating, because hopefully it helps you when you are creating. I did find it easiest to stamp the stems of the mushrooms, then die cut them, then finish stamping. And the great thing is if you go ahead and die cut them and then place that paper and the die cut piece back inside of the negative space of your cardstock, it gives you that great little mask kind of to line up, and it holds in place beautifully. Or you can tape it in place on the back with your Post-it tape if you want to. I do it both ways. My mat in my Misty, the grip mat that I'm using from Waffle Flower, is not super sticky at the moment. It needs washed. If I'd wash it off, I'm sure it's got paper dust and powder dust and, whatever on it. It will be stickier again, but I had noticed that it wasn't very sticky when I was stamping this. Now, to keep my color palette pretty classic today, I am using reds, yellows, greens, and browns. That's basically it. There is going to be a little bit of blue on the snow globe or terranium shaped card for just the kind of to mimic, I suppose, the look of glass somewhat. But for everything else, I just stuck to lots of neutrals with pops of reds, greens, and yellows. I love Lobster Red ink from Lawn Fawn. It is my all-time favorite red ink. So if you guys have been here a while, you know that is my absolute favorite red ink to use, whether I'm stamping on craft or white. It's a true red. To me, that is just a super true red, and it gives you really crisp results, especially when doing things like stamp layering, which I'm doing today. The other colors I am going to be using, the brown shades I'm using are Pizza Crust, which is the very, very light color. In fact, it only darkens or ends up darkening the Kraft Cardstock. It's what I'm using for the highlight here. And what was I going to say? Oh, and it's for the stems for the kind of wonky looking mushrooms. Dough is the color I used for the base of the mushrooms. Then obviously Lobster for the mushroom caps. And number 2 pencil is a fantastic yellow. That's what I'm using for the little flowers. And I'm using Artichoke and Noble Fir for the leaves and stems and things. Now this background, what's funny, I didn't realize this was the name of it until I went and looked up the name. It is called the cross stitch background, which is appropriate for me. I am an avid cross stitcher, but I love it. I think it's a really cool detail. And I did use my Spellbinders Tool-in-One to remove some of those little parts and pieces from this panel. I'm using walnut stained and ground espresso to add a little bit of color to the background. I'm keeping the color towards the center, almost going out to that edge, but not quite. This is something I like to do quite often, and it just kind of adds almost an instant frame, if you will, to the background. Now, because all of those little pieces popped out, you can put a contrasting piece of cardstock behind this and that color will pop through. I did not really want something to pop through here, so I am going to layer this on another piece of the Desert Storm. Before I do so, I do want to add some spatter to my background. This is the Fallen Acorn Distress Mica Stain, and I'm trying to get it mixed up really well, and some of those mica flakes had really settled in the bottom. It doesn't matter so much as far as spraying goes, but I do want them evenly dispersed. And then I just dip a paintbrush in there and pick up the product. This gives a much more controlled spatter than if you would spray. Spray is going to, and I like both techniques, I really do. But lately I've really been liking like a little bit less is more. So you can definitely do that. Now on the back of this panel, I'm just going to go through and add dabs of glue, and I actually added them kind of in all of those little squares just to make it stay nice and flat. And here's where I'm placing it right on top of that other piece of Desert Storm. I'm making sure any of the little pieces that popped out, a couple of them were stuck to the back and I didn't want them to make it wonky. Oh, that's so pretty. Now we're going to build our card, but we need a greeting. There are a couple of fantastic greetings in this particular stamp set. And again, this stamp set is called Wild About Mushrooms, but I'm going to use those on my other two cards. On this card, I took a greeting from the Sapling frame set, which that's all I'm using. This is a really cool set, but it has coordinating dies for the greetings, which I love, so I can die cut that perfectly. And I stamped You're Starting to Grow on Me with the walnut ink, and I'm die cutting it with the coordinating die. Again, really keeping with my theme of the Desert Storm, being my base color. There's not going to be any white. And then I went ahead and assembled my card, and I did do that off camera to save a little time. Lots of foam went into the building and construction of this bad boy. This is an example of two separate borders separated by a sentiment, which I love that look as well. And then I put glossy accents in the center of my flowers so it gives the centers a nice glossy look. I placed my panel back into my spatter box, and I'm adding a little bit more of the Fallen Acorn Distress Mica stain, just so that there are some spatters on the leaves and mushrooms and all of that good stuff. Okay, we are going to go ahead and move on to the second card design now. And for this one, my idea behind this was to create a card that has three, well, however many would fit, in this case 3, but little individual scenes, I guess, if you will. One will be a sentiment, and they're divided or separated into tags or labels. And we're using the April Reflections labels as kind of our little background scene builders. But I want to build my background first. And one of my all-time 100% have used it over and over again, and much in this way because it's my favorite way to use it, is this background stamp from Simon Says Stamp. This is the wood planks. I use it all of the time. I stamped the design on the Desert Storm cardstock with the walnut ink from Lawn Fawn, and now I'm going to take walnut stain and ground espresso and add color. And the benefit of this, as opposed to white, I've done this on white cardstock as well, I didn't feel like I had to maybe apply as much ink. It was a lot easier starting with a base color that was already brown to build that beautiful wood grain texture. Already, with the addition of the walnut stain, it's starting to look like a real piece of wood, which I love. This is why this background is probably in my top 5 backgrounds stamps that I use, and I've used it so many times. Then around the edges, we're going to go in with ground espresso just to deepen and darken it a little bit. And we will, of course, place this in our spatter box and use the Fallen Acorn Distress Mica stain for this background too. It's going to be a little bit more subtle because this background is a little darker. This color, when it dries, there will be some nice shimmery blotches, but I definitely like the addition of a little bit of distress on all of these. So when it first goes on and it starts to dry, oh, you can see the shimmer, I guess. I wasn't sure if you could see it on camera or not. I'll kind of try to tip it a little bit. There, you can see it pretty good. Now we want to die cut and stamp all the rest of the pieces for our card. And I am going to use, again, these little frames here. I'm using the small and the medium. and I need to clip them apart, and we're going to die cut the Desert Storm cardstock with these, 2 of the small and 1 of the medium. This is still going to end up being what I like to call kind of a quadrant style card, even though there's only 3 tags. That kind of 4th quadrant, if you will be some greenery and flowers, which you'll see as we assemble this. I love the shape of these frames. Papertrey Ink has a lot of frames like this that I highly recommend if you love having a little frame to place on your card. So you're going to see me play with these frames and get my placement. And I already kind of had an idea what I thought I would like, and I definitely do. I want them all to be kind of, I don't want them to be perfectly stacked. You could even turn them on its side if you want to. I ended up not doing that, but I really kind of just played around with it. So you'll see the top kind of has the 2 small tags, and the bottom has a big tag, and then that space to the right is where we will add some greenery. Once I have that how I like it, they are a little too perfect for our grungy wood grain background. So let's add some ink around the edges of these with our same walnut stain or ground espresso ink. And I'm just going to go around the edges. We're going to leave the center pretty much that Desert Storm, but grunging up the edges really adds so much to the overall look and feel of these little tags. And you can use any shape here. I think circles would be cute, traditional tag shapes, any of the Papertrey Ink little frame shapes. You can mix and match them. I just love this as a base for building our little scenes on. And we'll go all the way around this guy as well. Love that so much. And look how much better they look against that wood plank background with the distressed edges. Absolutely perfect. I should mention I am using Distress Oxides, but you could totally do the same thing with Distress Ink. Now, I did go ahead and stamp all of these mushrooms off camera. It was pretty much just like I showed you for the first card. Everything is stamped in the exact same colors, just a few different parts and pieces. This time I am using a sentiment from that stamp set, Hope Your Birthday is Wild. I've stamped it on one of the small tags with embossing ink, and I'm heat embossing with white embossing powder, which is going to show up beautifully. There's not a lot of white on these cards, but I love how the white embossing then really takes center stage. Now, I am just using whatever pen was near. This is, I think, a Stardust glitter pen, but I made 2 little dots, and I am using a hole punch to punch 2 little holes to actually make this a tag. So coming from the front, I'm going to thread through some red hemp twine, and I'm going to go through, I think, about 3 times to give it a little bit more of a prominent presence, if you will. And I'm going to tie it into a little bow on the front. This is a really fun way to take a shape that maybe isn't a tag and turn it into one. And the hemp twine from Lawn Fawn, oh my word, I know I've mentioned it over and over, but it is like my absolute favorite thing ever. It's nice and thin, so it's not going to be super bulky. It ties beautifully. You can wrap it around, and we're going to use it on this and our 3rd card. And that looks adorable. Now we're going to pop everything up here with foam as well. Lots of foam was used in the creation of today's cards. Today's cards are sponsored by Simon Says Stamp Foam Adhesive. No, not really, but I feel like I should put that disclaimer because I had quite the little backing mess when I was finished. I really like the look of them popped up off the background. Even with just the Hope Your Birthday is Wild tag popped up, it does make a huge difference. So let's go ahead and build the rest of our tag images, and I do think I put most of these, assemble most of these on camera. I know a lot of the first card I did not, but we are going to assemble them here. And I'm using everything as a guide, and I personally like I'm using my large mushrooms, pardon me, as a guide. I personally like when elements hang off the edge of my tags. So some, excuse me, some of the leaves, some of the flowers are going to hang off of the edge, hang off the top. We're also going to tuck greenery back behind this large one, and some of the greenery is going to shoot up and over the other small tag. So just, it makes a more complete picture, but yet there's still 3 distinct tags or 4 distinct areas. Oh, yep, I did use the layering piece for that mushroom. I couldn't remember how many I did. I think there's a couple on this one that I did use the layering piece, and I do love that you can use it with or without. For me, one of the keys for these mushroom cards is the addition of all of the little flowers. I think that they soften, tie into, just add that wonderful floral to the little mushroom design. Almost like storybook. To me, these colors look like little kids' storybooks almost. And I'm just going to continue to build, and I'm leaving it in to show you kind of the thought process, how things get where they're going, I guess, if you will. Because it definitely is a process, and sometimes things change and move and all of that good stuff. When I have most of what I want for this tag, I'm going to remove my foam backing and pop it onto my card base. I still have some things to add, but this is going to give me a better overall picture of where I'm going. And I also want to start adding in the big leafy greenery over here to the right. See where I need foam, or maybe where I need to move foam. There we go. I like that. And that just fills in that area so beautifully. And there's our little flower. It's starting to come together. The biggest tag obviously has the most images. Then we have our sentiment tag, and then we'll have a little tag with a single mushroom. But even though it's a single mushroom, and I did end up not adding a lot of extra things, it does have layers. You can see that I did stamp the extra layer for the top. And this is where I will end up adding, or pardon me, stamping extra flowers, stems, and leaves to add to my card. And I popped up the layering piece for this mushroom with foam. Now, I didn't add holes to the top of these other 2 labels. I felt like that might be just a little bit too much. I didn't want to add hemp to any of the rest of them, so I left all of these as is. And we're going to just pop that right there. I like some of the greenery to go over, some under, tie it all together. So it's looking like the bottom tag is about done. But now we need to figure out what else do we need. And I do want to add a little extra greenery up here at the top. I felt like it was a little light up at the top. We need something to kind of help soften it and tie it all together. So we'll add a couple of leaves up here. And then I do want to get some, I guess I already have the flower, but I need some additional flowers and stems just to kind of finish off the greenery in what I'm calling that 4th quadrant, that bottom right corner. So I will stamp a couple, or the long stem, you can see I've already got it there, another curvy stem, and those are all going to overlap kind of over here. And I'm trying to be very thoughtful where I place these. because I already have most everything attached. And I've placed some glossy accents in the center of those flowers, so I'm living on the edge, living dangerously here. Living dangerously with hoping I don't get my hand in it. And for some reason, I forgot that this went on the top, not underneath. And so I don't know why I kept trying to do that. I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, doesn't it fit in there? And I'm like, why doesn't it? It just slid in there. Oh yeah, it's because it goes like this. I just keeping it real, everybody. Keeping it real. And this, to me, those flowers, those final two flowers, just balance out the design perfectly. Oh, I love, love, love it. Let's add glossy accents to the center of those. And just like the first card, we're going to place this into our spatter box and add some of the Fallen Acorn Distress Mica Stain, giving this a little bit of spatter as well, letting it dry, and then gluing to a white top fold card base. So those are our first two cards, all finished. And they both use the Wild About Mushrooms stamp set. Now we're going to use Into the Blooms. But first, we are going to go to another standard, reliable die set that I have used over and over and over again. And this is the Snow Globe from Honeybee Stamps. And I love it for creating a card-sized snow globe, or in this case, let's say it's a terrarium. So we are going to fold a piece of 11 by 4 1/4 Kraft Cardstock in half. We're going to slightly place the die past the crease in the top of the card, run it through the die cut machine, and that's going to create our snow globe shaped card. I have another panel to place on the front. We're also going to have a frame and the base. But let's start with the background first, which we want to add color to. And this is going to require quite a lot of color, starting with Speckled Egg, and then we'll use Uncharted Mariner to just add color right over the top of the craft, just like you would with white. Now I will say, once I have my blue inks in place, I did feel like they were a little too bright. That's what I want to say. So I will take my brown blending brush and just go over the top and grunge it up a little teeny tiny bit. I love being able to take a brown or a black and grunge something just the teeniest tiny bit to give it a little more interest, I guess, if you will. I love these blues. But at this point, it looked more like a winter wonderland and a little less like the blue I wanted for my grungy mushrooms, which is fine if I was doing a snowman card or a winter card. Okay. And I'm looking at it and I'm looking at it and I'm like, yeah, we need some brown. I'm going to go around the edges first. And then just kind of gently pull in over the blue. And instantly you can see how that grunges it just a little bit. I love it. I don't want to go super hard or heavy because I still want it to be blue-ish. I just want it to have a little bit more of that grungy, almost kind of a Mercury kind of look. Then I die cut all of my Into the Blooms from Kraft Cardstock, and we will be applying color with Distress Oxide inks right on top of these as well. This is some peeled paint and forest moss is what we're using first. I do recommend more of a pouncing motion for these delicate leaves as opposed to the circular blending motion. That way you're not going to tear anything. We're just gonna, again, add a little greenery. You can add a little brown to these as well if you want to grunge them up, just like I did for the background. And I'm going to continue to kind of clean as I go with a baby wipe on my glass matte surface. I don't want to cross-contaminate anything. The mushrooms all have lots of building pieces, as you will see. There's 3 distinct layering die-cut mushrooms and then 2 smaller, thinner little individual mushrooms, plus the greenery. I'm using every little part and piece, I think, that came with this today. Lots of walnut stain, ground espresso. We're going to use lumberjack plaid, wild honey, but the wild honey is really bright yellow, an orangey yellow, I guess I should say. And while I love it as the base color, way too bright for this card. So again, we're going to take our brown blending brush and we're going to grunge it. We're going to grunge the red because I feel like the lumberjack plaid also a little too bright and happy. And you're going to see the progression of this as I add the color. There are a lot of ways to add color to your die cut. You can watercolor them, you can color them with markers, you can color them with pencils, you can color them with other inks. You can use, your regular distress inks as opposed to distress oxides, whatever your jam is. And there I added that wild honey, but I added some of the ground espresso over it. Here's lumberjack plaid. And I love lumberjack plaid, but I really it was too pretty. We need that to be grungier. Otherwise, I think the mushroom will stand out like a sore thumb. And again, look how awesome it looks with the brown. Oh, I love, love, love it. And just assembling as we go. There are little dots, spots for our mushrooms. I will be adding those a little bit later. They are stuck right now in the cardstock, as a lot of small dies do. And that's going to work to my benefit because I'm going to ink them as they're still attached to the cardstock, and then we'll glue them on. Kind of lastly, it was almost an afterthought. I wasn't sure if I would use them or not, but I did end up using them. I'm loving how my mushrooms are coming out. And I think, oh yeah, I did brown and I meant to do red first. So we're going to do opposite for this one. Oh, I did a little green. And then we'll do a little red. It's building upon building upon building color. And I think I ended up not adding that until after I had it together. And I was like, oh, it's too brown. It needs some red. And that is how forgiving your inks and oxides are, because you can see that it's brown right now with that little hint of green in it, but on the finished card it looks red. And I did not die cut another one. I actually just made this one work. So the mushrooms are the wild honey, but then a general application of whatever brown was left on my blending brush. Yeah, I'm like, nope. Lumberjack plaid to the rescue. And it really ended up, look at how great that covered. I was so happy. We do need more leaves, and I did want these to be a slightly different color. So this time we're going to take our rustic wilderness, but we're going to, again, liberally add in some brown on top of this so they're not so bright, Christmas pine tree green. Definitely want it to be a little grungy. Now, once we have all of our parts and pieces, it is time to put it all together. I do want to add a stamped greeting to the top of my globe here, and I'm going to do this with another sentiment from the mushroom set. And the base of this honeybee stamped snow globe, I wanted it to look wood grain, so I'm going to just grab my wood planks stamp, and I'm going to ink up just a little bit of this with that walnut ink, like a strip. And I'm just going to press that into it. This was my lazy girl way of adding that texture. And then we'll ink it just like we did for that previous card. Do a quick little cleanup of our wood plank background. And then walnut stain and ground espresso for this. And also for the frame that goes around our snow globe, I wanted that to have a little, it was a little too perfect. Desert Storm cardstock as well. So we'll go ahead and I just inked it up a minute ago. Now that we have our parts and pieces, we are ready for final assembly. And for this, lots of foam, but not everything. The leaves, the little thin leaves and things, I felt like were almost a little too delicate to pop up very much. So most of those will be glued directly. Pardon my head in the way. I did just end up stamping with an acrylic block right onto my background with embossing ink, sprinkling on the white embossing powder. I did give my background plenty of time to air dry. With oxide inks, you definitely want to make sure that you've given it enough time to air dry. Then I'm stamping and embossing with white so it really shows up nicely. And we want to start building our scene. And I just need to kind of have a general idea of where everything is going to go. And then lots of foam again. Okay, I did speed up just the assembly process for all of these little parts and pieces. We'll go back to normal here in a minute, but just to save a little bit of time, I wanted to keep it in, but still save some time. So what I like to do often if I've got greenery is I like to place it with the larger image. So in this case, a mushroom. And then I like to manipulate it. Maybe part of the leaves are in front, part are in the back. I kind of like to tuck the end of that stem back behind the base of my mushroom. And because I'm not popping up the greenery with foam, it's still slightly popped up, but nice and secure because it's attached. It does have liquid adhesive, and these are so delicate that you really can kind of manipulate them. You can see I kind of curved it out of the way of the word joy in my sentiment. And I'm trying to work fairly quickly so that I can tuck some of the images back behind other things, especially if there's any liquid glue. And I love the addition of lots of extra greenery in this case. I think it ties it all together really nicely. And I'm trying to use the littlest amount of glue as possible. For any of these little delicate pieces. Okay, that looks really good. Now we're going to go ahead and glue our frame in place. We're going to glue that wood grain base that we inked in place. And before we attach this, I did start to attach this to our shaped card base that we die cut. I want to wrap a little twine around the bottom of this. So this is another good opportunity to embellish with something dimensional. And of course, we can't forget the Fallen Acorn Distress Mica Stain. I'm just going to mix it up again. And then we're going to tap this all over. And I want to do this before I attach the frame and before I attach the base to my card. And it looks really blotchy now, but of course it will dry and give us these beautiful brown shimmery spots. Oh, it's going to look so good. I love, love, love it. Now here are all of the little spots for our mushrooms. And I mentioned earlier that they're kind of stuck in the cardstock, and that's a great thing. Because they're stuck in there, I can easily take my blending brush and just kind of whatever was left, whatever ink is left on there is what I use. So a combination of wild honey and probably ground espresso. And then I'm going to simply add little dabs of glue, pop these out, and we're going to place these all over our mushroom caps. And I'm glad I added these. I wasn't really sure if I wanted to, but the detail that they provide, I really love. So I added quite a few to the tallest mushroom, and then maybe 3 to the tiny one and 2 to the other one. Just a little bit. It doesn't have to be a ton, just a little bit here and there. I'm just going to pop them out. They are so teeny tiny. I know there's a little glue around a couple of these. It will dry completely clear and it won't leave that, you know, white that you're seeing right now. I got a little excited with my glue. Okay, so it looks amazing. I love it. We're just going to put glue all the way around. We're going to frame up our cute little scene, and I did glue it down, and almost instantly I was like, oh yeah, you have the twine. So let me put the glue on the base, because it's between the base and the other panel. That is where I want to add my twine. So I was lucky and I was able to kind of pop it up real quick, like slide my twine underneath and wrap it around about 3 times, tie it into a bow. And I maybe added a little bit more glue just to make sure it was nice and secure. I can't remember if I did or not. It may have still been, there may still have been enough there that I didn't have to. There we go. Isn't that fun? I love that little pop of red with the mushrooms. So pretty. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this set of 3 mushroom cards featuring Papertrey Ink, stamps, and dies. The supplies I use to create my cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Thank you guys so much for joining me today, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye! Thank you so much for joining me today for another paper crafting tutorial. I love being able to share with this incredible community of crafters. I want to give a huge shout out and special thank you to my amazing Patreon members. If you're interested in joining Patreon, please click the link in the description underneath the video here on YouTube. Patreon is a private community where you can support more of what I do. There is exclusive content, information, and behind-the-scenes content. Top-tier members will receive a handmade birthday card during your birthday month, access to D-Stash, and monthly exclusive lives, plus so much more. We would love to have you join our growing community. Please be sure to subscribe to my channel, click that like button, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to always be notified when I have a new video. Thanks for watching!